Over 20 years, hundreds of psychiatric patients were fed controlled diets that stripped away essential vitamins from their meals, while researchers tracked every blood draw, every skin lesion, every violent outburst, and every moment they stopped caring whether they lived at all. This is the Elgin State Hospital vitamin deprivation experiments. Welcome back to the lab, my curious test subjects. I am your mad scientist, and today we are diving into one of the longest-running nutritional experiments in American medical history. The setting is Elgin State Hospital in Illinois, also known as the Illinois Northern Hospital for the Insane. The time period stretches from the 1930s all the way into the 1960s. The subjects are long-term psychiatric patients. The experiments are designed to answer a simple question. What happens to the human body when you remove essential vitamins for years at a time? And here is the part that makes this story especially disturbing. The patients were perfect test subjects, not because they volunteered, but because they were trapped. They could not leave. They could not complain effectively. And most importantly, they had no idea they were part of an experiment at all. So why did researchers choose psychiatric patients for experiments that required years of dietary control? The answer is as simple as it is disturbing. In research terms, that means they had subjects who could not leave, could not complain effectively, and could not say no. In 1935, a man named Max Horwitt arrived at Elgin State Hospital. He was a nutritional researcher, educated at Dartmouth and Yale, and he became the founding director of the L.B. Mendel Research Laboratory at the hospital. He would stay there for over 30 years, and during that time, he and his colleagues would manipulate the diets of long-term patients to study vitamins. Now, before we get to the vitamin experiments, we need to talk about what else was happening at Elgin. Between 1931 and 1933, patients at the hospital were injected with radium-266, completely voluntary, obviously. There are two stories about why. One version says researchers wanted to see if radium could treat schizophrenia. The other version says they just wanted to study how the human body handles radioactivity. Either way, psychiatric patients were injected with a radioactive element. This is the context. This is the culture. So when Horwitt and his team started planning long-term vitamin studies in the 1940s, they had a unique opportunity. Think of it like a clinical trial, except nobody signed anything. Nobody explained the risks, and the subjects thought they were just eating hospital food. The experiments would run for over 20 years. Patient 1, Patient 10. Patient 100, the Food and Nutrition Board of the National Academy of Science knew about the studies. Leading nutritional researchers of the time provided advice and input. And the patients, they were just living their lives, eating their meals, completely unaware they had become human test subjects. Now, what happens when you systematically remove vitamins from a human diet for years? Let me walk you through exactly what Horwitt and his colleagues did. First, vitamin E. Vitamin E is stored in body fat, like a backup battery. To drain it completely, you need years of controlled deprivation. So the researchers fed a group of patients a diet deficient in vitamin E for 5 years. In research terms, that means the patients were walking test tubes. Their vitamin E blood levels fell. The lifespan of their red blood cells shortened. But here is the strange part. There were no reports that the patients became visibly ill, so the researchers moved on. Next, vitamin B2, also called riboflavin. They fed subjects a diet deficient in B2 for several months. This time, many patients developed skin lesions, visible physical harm. Spoiler, the results were not great for the test subjects. But the most disturbing experiment involved vitamins B1, called thiamine, and B2 combined. The researchers fed schizophrenic and demented men diets deficient in both vitamins for over 2 years. 2 years, the men became lethargic. They lost interest in activities. Some became violent. After the vitamins were restored, the patients improved. Proof that the experiment had caused the symptoms. Then there were the 36 male patients who received diets low in vitamin B1 for up to 3 years. During that time, researchers took multiple blood samples while the men were fasting, resting, and exercising. They measured blood glucose, pyruvic acid, lactic acid. Every biological response tracked. Every data point recorded. 5 years for vitamin E, several months for B2, over 2 years for B1 and B2 combined. 36 men tracked for 3 years straight. And through it all, not one patient was told what was happening to them. So what happened after the experiments ended and the papers were published? Here is where the story gets even darker. When the vitamins were restored, the patients improved, their symptoms reversed, their energy returned. Some stopped being violent. This was proof. The experiments had worked. The data was solid, and the researchers published their findings. The Elgin projects continued well into the 1960s. Over 20 years of controlled nutritional deprivation, the results contributed to much of what we know today about vitamin requirements in the human diet. Vitamin E storage, B vitamin deficiency symptoms, the biological markers of malnutrition. All of it came from these experiments. But here is the part that should make your skin crawl. In the published papers, the researchers carefully acknowledged everyone who contributed: scientists, technicians, physicians, consultants. Every professional involved received credit. The patients, not one mention. In research terms, that means the patients were treated as lab equipment, not human contributors. There was no acknowledgement of their participation, no mention of consent, not even an indication that the subjects knew they were part of a study. The scientists got tenure, the patients got nothing. Imagine reading the credits of a movie and realizing the actors were never listed. Just the director, the crew, and the caterers. Now remember, this was not some rogue operation. The Food and Nutrition Board of the National Academy of Science knew about these studies. They provided advice. Leading researchers of the time gave input. This was sanctioned. This was considered acceptable. 20 years, hundreds of patients, dozens of publications, 0 mentions of consent. The patients lived at Elgin because they were mentally ill, and society decided they needed to be locked away. The researchers saw an opportunity, and they took it, for 2 decades. And that is how we learned what vitamins do to the human body. All it took was decades of captive psychiatric patients, 0 informed consent, and a medical establishment willing to call it science as long as nobody asked the subjects. Progress. The Elgin State Hospital experiments are a perfect example of what happens when vulnerable populations meet researchers who see opportunity instead of people. The patients were not volunteers. They were not informed. They were not even acknowledged in the publications that built careers and shaped our understanding of nutrition. They were just there, trapped in a system that decided their bodies were more valuable as data than as human beings. Today, the Elgin Mental Health Center still operates. The experiments are part of the historical record. The vitamin research is still cited. And the patients who lived through years of controlled deprivation, who developed skin lesions and violent outbursts and lost all interest in living, remain unnamed and unacknowledged. If this story made you feel something, my curious test subjects, leave a comment below. Subscribe for more experiments that should have never happened. I will be here in the lab.